It's October 2018 and Bethesda's latest Fallout game has just been released. You're fresh out of the vault and stumble upon the Alpine River Cabins. Nothing really stands out at first, but everything is so new to you can't wait to explore. There's a few cabins and one holds a mysterious tape.
Hi, this is Gabe Ramses, and I'm leaving this message to inform the Parks and Rec Department of the horrible experience my family and I had this week at the Alpine River Cabins. Look, we were all looking forward to a nice weekend getaway in the wilderness, but between the constant shaking in the cabins, rodent swarms, and blood-curdling screams, well, I'm more stressed than I was before. My boys were so upset they swore they saw the picture frames spinning on the walls.
Suddenly everything starts to shake. You hear screaming in the distance, and upon checking another cabin, you find the painting spinning. What's going on? Did you stumble upon some haunted location in the woods? Then you notice the speakers in the middle of the camp, and following the wires, you eventually stumble across a treehouse with a computer that controls everything. It's all some weird, elaborate prank that someone had been pulling. But it gets you to thinking, is the supernatural actually present in Fallout? Today we'll be diving into all things supernatural in Fallout. Ghosts, psychics, and cryptids will all be present. So grab your Mothman blanket, get comfy, and let's get into it. The world of Fallout is well known for its sci-fi post-apocalyptic setting, a world where corporations conducted horrific experiments on the populace, and mutated creatures roam the wastes. What many don't know is that the world has dark secrets, and the supernatural lurks around every corner. While the Alpine River Cabins in Fallout 76 are fake, that doesn't mean ghosts don't exist in the Fallout universe. In fact, we can meet several of them ourselves throughout the games. Way back in Fallout 2, the Chosen One could meet the Great Ananias. Ananias? Yes. A self-proclaimed magician whose two big claims to magic were his genuine mummy and the haunted house next door. The mummy turned out to be a comatose ghoul called Woody who'd gone missing, but the house is the real deal. Asking about the haunted house reveals that it once housed a princess who was poisoned by an evil magician and had her magical amulet stolen. Now, her restless spirit haunts the house and appears at the witching hour. When the Chosen One meets this ghost, we discovered she's called Anna Winslow. And while she doesn't react to the Chosen One's presence, she does mention her stolen locket. Hilariously, one of the speech options at this point is to tell her to turn her stealth boy off, a line that's led many to doubt Anna's supernatural origin. When you do finally track down the locket, it's held by Joey, a small-time jet dealer. He used to live in the abandoned home that Anna now haunts, scavenging for scrap to sell. He found the locket and has kept it all this time. Now, no matter how the Chosen One then retrieves the locket, whether from Joey's body or bartering, when they return it to Anna, she'll mention her mother, father, or grandma and tell them she's finally coming before turning into a pile of bones. The Chosen One can then take these to the graveyard and lay them to rest in her empty grave, which does raise some questions. Did she rise up from here when her necklace was stolen? What actually caused her death? Was Joey the evil wizard, and did he poison her with jet for the necklace? We most likely won't ever know the full story, but it's interesting to think about. As mentioned, the other theory behind Anna is that she's a habitual stealth boy user, which could explain her ghostly appearance and scrambled marbles. We know from the Nightkin that extensive use of stealth boys can cause a multitude of mental problems such as schizophrenia, delusions, and affected speech, all of which could add up to the idiosyncrasies in the way Anna acts, although the disappearing into a pile of bones would be hard to explain. Maybe it was all just some elaborate sleight of hand? Now, Anna isn't the only ghostly occurrence in the Fallout franchise that we can argue is the result of the use of stealth boys. Jumping ahead now to the Fallout 4 DLC Far Harbor.
We'll return to Adam. Richter, this is insane. You can't expect us to...
Will there be anything else?
That'll be all, sister.
Thank you, Grand Zealot.
If the sole survivor tries joining the Children of Atom on the island, you'll be asked to go and drink from a nearby spring that grants Adam's vision upon his followers. Upon drinking, the sole survivor will begin to hallucinate and a shadowy woman will ask you to follow her. She guides you past numerous shadowy creatures, including a fog crawler, but none are overtly hostile unless you yourself attack. The figure will guide you to a shrine with an icon behind a locked door. After deciphering the password, which is painted on the side of a locker and spells out Mother with elements from the periodic table, you pick up the icon, a carved statue of the Mother, and everything will return to normal. This shadowy figure is known as the Mother of the Fog. She's a messenger sent by Adam to guide the children. When they were first driven out and left to wander the island, the Mother appeared to them and guided them to their new home, the Nucleus. Definitely a spooky figure, and if you were to actually attack them, they can't be killed, unlike the other fog creatures. But the answer may not be all supernatural. You see, the sole survivor was definitely hallucinating after drinking such a heavily irradiated spring, and if we head to a ruined house nearby, we can find the remnants of one of the hermit's camps. The hermit has been observing the island, writing notes in the same unique way that the note we read to open the locked door was. And under the table where we find these notes is a stealth boy, their method of getting around the island unscathed. Another oddity to bear in mind is the periodic table puzzle. If we use the numbers and place them on the periodic table nearby ourselves, instead of Mother, we actually get Esther, which is the name of one of the children of Adam in the expansion Winter of Adam for the Fallout tabletop RPG. Winter of Adam takes place before Fallout 4, so maybe the Mother is actually Esther, who came over here with the Atomites and has been guiding them as kind of a ghostly holy figure. But enough with ghosts that can be explained away. Staying in Fallout 4, next we'll take a trip over to Nuka World, Fallout 4's evilest DLC. If you stayed within Nuka World, you may never have noticed this location. For those that explored will eventually have come across the Grandchester Mystery Mansion, a rather spooky location. Upon reaching the manor, you may have originally been drawn to the robot at the front, selling tickets, and missed the girl in the top window staring down at you. If we jump up to her, whether using a backpack or some console commands, we can see she's in a room with one entrance that's been sealed from the inside. We can't interact with her though. After getting the key from the robot at the gate, we can enter the Grandchester mansion. The tour recordings still work, and as we move from room to room, we learn the fate of the Grandchester family. Morticia Grandchester nearly passed away giving birth to Lucy, and Hannibal Grandchester, who hadn't even wanted the child, resented her for nearly taking his wife away. Lucy was a difficult child, and while her mother spent time with her reading stories, Lucy had no friends and spent a lot of time alone, which may be what resulted in her sick hobby. You see, Lucy liked to collect small animals, and after a while, the animal skins would be found nailed to the underneath of the furniture. Eventually, this convinced Morticia that Lucy was possessed by evil spirits, and while Hannibal thought he could beat them out of her, Morticia was convinced by a psychic that what they had to do was confuse the spirits by creating the most convoluted house in the world. Staircases to nothing, doors to concrete walls, and a hall of just fireplaces with some of the unique architectural choices they made. The spirits either didn't care or weren't confused, and as Lucy grew older, she began to make attempts on her parents' lives, such as poisoning their food. It all came to a head when Hannibal came to beat Lucy after impaling himself on a rusty spike that just so happened to be inside his boot. Lucy managed to impale his eyes on a pair of scissors, which she claimed she held up to defend herself when he came at her with his cane. Her only explanation for why each of his fingers had been cut off, though, was that it stopped him holding the cane again. Morticia was found in the master bedroom with a doll shoved in her mouth and rope burns around her wrists, though no rope was ever found. Lucy was adamant that the doll did everything, because Morticia wouldn't give it a kiss goodnight. After this, Lucy was committed to an asylum, but on her 18th birthday she escaped, and 9 days later she was found hanging in the attic. Now, at the end of the tour, we encounter Zachariah, an ex-gunner who's been using this place as a base and traps for traders passing by. On his terminal, though, he mentions hearing a young girl laughing, and during our trip for the mansion, we kept hearing the same thing. Occasionally seeing a girl running through doors we couldn't access. Now, we could just leave here, and that would be the end of it, but in this room is a master locked door to the attic, And once we get up the stairs, we see the girl once again running to the side, and as we run to catch up to her, she passes through a door. A door with nothing but a wood wall on the other side. Seems like once Lucy came back, she never left. Now, this location is based on the Winchester Mystery House, a place that has many, many ghostly folk tales told around it. Although pretty much all have been made up to encourage tourism, but the house was created in a similar fashion. Doors to nowhere, staircases that lead to solid walls. The creator was very indecisive about how they wanted it built and kept changing their mind halfway through. Supposedly, she kept building on the house to give workers jobs during a time when they could be hard to come by. Now, for something less in your face, but still as unexplainable, we head to New Vegas. Now, in many of the graveyards across the world, the courier can hear faint whispering. Just listen. One of the places with the loudest and most consistent whispering is the cemetery at Camp Forlorn Hope, the front lines of the NCR's war against Caesar's Legion. Most view being stationed there as a punishment, as you most likely won't leave, and so the spirits here seem to be the loudest and angriest for good reason. These aren't the only auditory hallucinations that we can experience or hear about other people experiencing as well. Listening Post Bravo is a very memorable location for most people. If you follow the Brotherhood questline, this is where you'll eventually confront Dance. But what is even more interesting about this location is its past and one Sergeant J.P. Rensk, who was stationed here. He was set to spend a month underground alone monitoring the radio, but soon after, things start to become weird. One day, while monitoring the low band frequencies, he discovered a repeating message. The static made it hard to decipher, but he was able to make out a few phrases, such as internal void, dreams are getting darker, and blood runs so still. And the last thing was presumably the call sign, D-E-K. He sent off a recording to Washington to see if he could get a translation. Nothing else really happened for a few days until he was awoken by a banging sound. It came from the elevator, like something was trying to get out, but the elevator had been locked down since he got there. He activated all the defenses and broke out the emergency rifle, and it just stopped, leaving him with a strange feeling it was all somehow related to the broadcast he'd intercepted previously. Now, 5 days after the elevator incident, Washington finally got in touch to say the holotape recording he'd sent was blank. Playing back the original, he found it was true, and after explaining what he'd heard with the elevator, they assured him they were sending a replacement, as he was most likely suffering from auditory hallucinations from being isolated for so long. It is worth noting, though, that this location is pretty close to the Dunwich Borers, a location where the sole survivor experienced hallucinations caused by one of the old gods. Maybe the sergeant was being reached out to by Quoltoth. He's underground and close enough for whatever lies in Dunwich to reach out to him. Now, we did a full video breakdown on the old gods of Fallout you can find here, but as a brief overview for this video, there are ties between locations across Fallout that have unexplainable occurrences. In Fallout 3 at the Dunwich building and the Point Lookout DLC, we encounter mentions of Quoltoth, an old god. We even find his book, the Kriv Bekna, and a suspicious obelisk deep underground which are worshipped and have strange powers. We can even meet an old god in Fallout 76, the Interloper, an incredibly strange being. The questline with the Calverts touches on ancient races that ruled the world before man and their dormant cities hidden below ground, which in fact may be part of what is going on at Dunwich Borers. The Fallout tabletop RPG even takes you to one of these underground cities in the Commonwealth where an ancient old god is waking up. There's much more to it, and I've done a full video on every mention of the Eldritch and their connections. I just couldn't do a supernatural Fallout video without at least mentioning some of it. Whilst researching this video though, I did find something new for the Dunwich mystery. You see, down in the bottom of the Dunwich building where we find Quoltoth's obelisk, if you hang around and listen, occasionally you'll hear whispers. Saying Al-Hazred or Gif. What is very strange, however, is that if you go to the Red Racer factory, battle your way through the ghouls in the factory, and head towards the CEO offices, you'll encounter the surgeon, who has been experimenting with chips to control ghouls and super mutants. But in his lab, if you stop to listen, you'll hear the same whispering. I've tried looking, but I can't find the link between these big corporations. It may even just be to do with how many people the surgeon has cut up in his location, but it's definitely something to think about. Carrying on with the ghostly occurrences though, if you've played Fallout, you've most likely noticed the mannequins and the teddy bears placed in sometimes funny, sometimes horrifying acts. For example, here at the Concord Speakeasy, you can find skeletons in all kinds of states, drinking or taking Excel. But upstairs in a bedroom that looks like it was broken into, we can find a skeleton hugging a mannequin on the bed. And in the bathroom, we can find a less humorous set of mannequins. It looks like they cornered this poor guy in the bathroom, took his head off, and then shoved it in the toilet. And this isn't the only time we find them being violent. In Fallout 76, there is an unmarked location where you can find a very disturbing scene. One person has been impaled on a tree with an axe, and nearby 2 others have been skinned. Their bodies still red and fresh. Following the blood trail takes us to an outhouse and the killer. Opening the door, we find a bloody mannequin holding an axe with a teddy bear riding their shoulder. But so what, right? Some raider probably just took too much jet and thought it'd be funny to arrange it all like this, right? Well, in Fallout 4's DLC, Far Harbor, out in the ocean, we can find a sunken boat surrounded by mannequins. It looks like the crew were overrun, and in the main cabin, we can find a skeleton being loomed over by a mannequin with a plank and this note next to him. I can't wait to drop these damn mannequins off. The crew is starting to claim they're hearing weird noises from the cargo. Maybe they're just playing pranks on me? Whatever, we're almost there. Looks like, even before the war, people will begin to have problems with the mannequins, moving around on their own. In Fallout 76, we can even find someone once again sleeping with a mannequin, but this one we have a note for some more context. You know I like you. The brothers like you too. You're easily my 4th favourite Pi Mu. But listen, the whole mannequin thing has got to stop. It was funny at first. We laughed along when you brought it home from the department store. I thought it was a little weird when you named it Susie and started taking it down to dinner, but whatever floats your boat, right? The last few days though, honestly, Badger, I don't even know what to say. We called a meeting and all decided that Susie needs to... Damn it, you've got me calling the stupid thing Susie now. Look, just get rid of the mannequin. This is me asking nicely. Sincerely, John. This next location turned out to be more of a myth, but it's interesting anyway. On your travels in the Commonwealth, you may have come across the Museum of Witchcraft. With the front door being locked, the only way in is through the basement. And as you sneak through in the dark, something is upstairs. Every footstep causing dust to float down. Body parts dropping in front of you as you try not to make a sound, and as you finally get upstairs, a deathclaw comes at you. This was one of the only real attempts by Fallout's base game to do horror, and honestly, it worked pretty well, especially if you weren't prepared for the fight afterwards. A deathclaw can be terrifying enough. This museum is covered in mannequins set up to represent different aspects of the witch trials, and they honestly can jump scare you as you're moving through the building. I saw multiple people online talk about how the mannequins here were like weeping angels that move around when you aren't looking, or righting themselves when you knock them over, and after thoroughly abusing the poor things, not one of them moved, apart from when I blew them up. And finally, this one raises so many questions. At the Slumber Mill Motel in the Shenandoah National Park, among the many, many weird things happening at this location, there is a terminal entry for an incident with a guest called the Case of the Mannequin. A female hotel guest checked in on Friday and departed on Sunday afternoon, spending the entirety of her 2-day stay confined to her room, only briefly leaving to fetch ice. Upon her checkout, the cleaning staff entered the room as scheduled and encountered an array of peculiar items left behind. A fully dressed mannequin decked out in ski gear was discovered lying in bed beneath a blanket. A note accompanied the scene stating, "Wrap up warm, looks like ice tonight." A photograph was found featuring the mannequin in the shower, taken from an unusual angle through the door frame. In response to all this, the cleaning team was instructed to conduct a deep clean of the room, disposing of the remaining items around the back. The nature of the discoveries left all of us curious as to what might have happened here, but a collective decision was made not to delve into the mysteries surrounding the guest choices due to fear of what we might find. Honestly, I respect their decision to not look into this further, and if we check out the dumpsters behind the motel, we can find the mannequin and the skis still resting there after whatever they suffered through in that room. Mannequins aren't the only ones we find doing things across the wasteland. Of course, we mentioned the teddy fear previously, but teddy bears and gnomes can be found doing all sorts across the wasteland. For example, here at Huntersville, we can find some gnomes disposing of a monkey that displeased them. Or here at an unmarked location, we can find several gnomes gathered around a body. And once again, teddy fear is watching on. The creepiest part, to me, if you pick up a gnome, it giggles. Leaving no doubt in my mind that they are possessed, or definitely up to something. So just bear that in mind the next time you pick one up to scrap for concrete. And we can't leave the not so inanimate object train without mentioning flamingos. These pink lawn objects are not just a unit of measurement in Fallout 76, but also appear to be part of Teddy Fear's murder gang. Here at Twin Lakes, we can find a man skewered with a flamingo, which may have been some incredibly strange mishap or some kind of fight, but when we look at our next location, it all becomes a little more sinister. You see, under a pylon near the Pioneer Scout camp in Fallout 76, you may have come across an odd sight. It seems the scientists had set up camp here before being surrounded by flamingos and executed before Candy Fan Mr. Fuzzy. Not Teddy Fears, but another teddy in a position of command before other inanimate objects. Also, I couldn't find any mention of this, but honestly it really reminds me of SCP-1507. The plastic lawn flamingos that may or may not have murdered a man. I mean, the only connection is that they are potentially murderous lawn flamingos, but there can't be that many of those out there. Now, we have seen many mentions of voices so far, but we aren't the only ones who hear them, and it opens up a whole new supernatural path for us to explore. We did actually get some background for Teddy Fears with the launch of the Fallout TV show, or, more importantly, the special live report from Galaxy News Radio. It seems that the manufacturers of Teddy Fears were in the middle of a lawsuit. The bears were causing sleep paralysis nightmares in children. If you don't know what sleep paralysis is, it's genuinely awful. In simple terms, your mind partially wakes up before your body does. You can't move anything, and it can feel like something is holding you down or pushing on your chest. And while your brain is still partially asleep, this can cause dreamlike hallucinations, usually unpleasant ones influenced by the feeling of being restrained. Personally, my sleep paralysis demon is a giant woman clad in all black whose joints snap and crack as she moves. I used to have a crawl space at the end of my bed, and she'd contort her way out, slowly crawling up the bed until my body finally caught up with my mind and I'd launch upright. One psychologist just seemed to think the bears were misunderstood, however. Although, what they mean by this, I'm not entirely sure. They may have been some kind of brain slave to the bears. Maybe they thought the sleep paralysis was just the bears being friendly and reaching out, but whatever they meant, due to the bears being recalled during the lawsuit, their prices skyrocketed as people scrambled to get their hands on them, which may be the only reason they haven't taken over the wasteland. And if we pick one up, we can hear it laughing. In New Vegas, at the 188 trading post, you may have come across the Forecaster, a kid who's managed to survive by selling his thinking. His parents are both gone, and he suffers from constant migraines unless he's wearing his medicine. If we pay him 100 caps, though, he'll take off his medicine and do some thinking for us. We can now ask about us, here and everywhere, and get some cryptic but accurate answers. For example, if we ask about us, he'll say,
"Okay. Let me take off my medicine. Your face does the thinking. 2 to the skull, yet 1 gets up. Odds are against you, but they're just numbers after the 2 to 1. You're playing the hand you've been dealt, but you don't let it rest. You shuffle and stack. And a gamble. A gamble that may pay off, but how? Forecast? Rapidly changing conditions."
Which fits in with where we've come from and what we'll do in the future. The Forecaster surrounds himself with junk items because when he's wearing his medicine, he can't think as well. and the items help fill his head with other people's thoughts. He also mentions his parents are gone, and sometimes when he takes his medicine off, he can see them for a while, but they can never stay, and he's just used to being on his own now, which is honestly very tragic. He does bring us to an interesting section though, with psychics in the Fallout universe. He's not the only one. In Fallout 4, you will have come across everyone's favourite fortune teller chem addict. Of course, I'm talking about Mama Murphy. Once you've saved her and brought her back to Sanctuary, she'll not only talk about how she knows you're from the past, but also offer to use her sight, as she calls it, to see the future. This can be really helpful as it gives hints for quests, but to access her sight, Mama Murphy will request some chems. And seeing as she's already so old, indulge her too often and she'll pass away. Do you want another death on your hands just to find your son? Mama Murphy believes so. She's lived a long and interesting life, and if shortening her life can help others, she's happy to. You can ask her about her life and she'll tell you stories of her youth, where she earned the name Murphy the Mad Woman, or how she quit using the sight for a handsome young man, only for them to become trapped because she didn't foresee it. When we find Mama Murphy, the raiders that have them pinned down in the museum are actually there because of her sight as well. At Corvega Assembly Plant, we can meet Jared, a raider boss who's been hunting Mama Murphy. Reading his terminal, we can learn how they know each other. You see, when Jared was young, Mama Murphy saw that he would be taken by raiders and become a monster. When this actually came to pass, Jared realized the sight was real and started to experiment with chems, believing if he could see the future, he would be unstoppable. He never gained any powers and so began experimenting on the raiders he commanded, drawing in more with the promise of free chems. This also showed no result until he heard about a caravan of survivors passing by with an old woman dressed as a fortune teller, and he just knew it had to be Mama Murphy. Luckily, the sole survivor rescues Mama Murphy from Concord and can then put a stop to the monster Jared once and for all. In Fallout 4, we also meet Lorenzo Cabot. Before the war, he was an archaeologist who discovered an ancient city that belonged to a race that predated humans. He was laughed at for his theories that humans weren't the first intelligent species to live on Earth, but he found proof. Buried under the desert, he found the remains of another civilization, and a crown that gave him psychic powers, while also making him immortal and a psychopath. He was able to fire psychic pulses using the gem on the crown, and in fact, if we side with his son in the quest, we'll obtain a gamma gun that he's adapted to use the gem, and can fire these pulses ourselves, albeit with an actual gun and without the psychosis and immortality of wearing the crown. I talked more about the city and the Elder Race in my Eldritch Gods video, which you can see here. In Fallout 3, in the Oasis, we could also meet Bloomseer Poplar, a doctor who joined the Tree Minders to discover new medicines, but also displays the gift of foresight. She doesn't require any medical headgear or chems to get her going, although she does need to take a rest for a few days after each attempt. The Lone Wanderer can ask for advice, and just like with Mama Murphy, Poplar will give out hints for the quests that we are on before needing a rest for a few days. Poplar isn't the only one in Fallout 3 we can meet with psychic powers either. In the Point Lookout DLC, the Lone Wanderer becomes embroiled in a war between a ghoul and a brain in a jar. This brain was once Professor Calvert, a genius in the field of robotics who, after some kind of altercation with Desmond the Ghoul, was forced to experiment on his own body using cutting-edge military experiments. Leaving him as nothing more than a brain in a jar, Calvert used a different type of medigel to preserve his brain. It was different to the stuff the RoboBrains or the think tank at Big MT used. It didn't stop the mental degradation, and he is slowly going mad, but it did give him psychic abilities. Despite Desmond setting up a jamming device, Calvert is able to telepathically communicate with his cult and even the Lone Wanderer. He aims to be able to take over everyone's mind at Point Lookout, and potentially even beyond, unless he's stopped. Jumping all the way back to the original Fallout, we have potentially one of the most horrific psychics of them all, the Master. The Master was once a man named Richard Morrow, who found shelter in Vault 8, one of the control vaults intended to repopulate the surface. After the vault reopened in 2092, Richard became exiled for murder and took on a role as Dr. Grey in the hub. He even met Harold the Tree Man back before he was part tree and became friends. Everything was fine for a while until Harold put together a group to investigate the mutant attacks on local caravans. Scavengers had been an issue for a while, but the increase in mutant attacks caused caravan leaders to hire large numbers of guards, and they still kept losing large numbers of people. Grey led the group, including Harold, to investigate the source of mutants. Eventually, they found the Mariposa military base. It was filled with hordes of mutants and security bots, and nearly everyone who came was lost. Apart from Grey and Harold. They made it into a room containing vats of what looked like acid before being hit by a robot crane. The last thing Harold saw before everything went dark was Grey falling into a vat of acid. Unfortunately, this was not the end of Grey. He survived, floating within the vat for days. The slimy fluid wasn't an acid, but actually FEV. The forced evolutionary virus has been used by antagonists all across the Fallout universe. It was originally intended to be used in low doses to create superior specimens and is highly programmable. But overdosing, such as full submersion, results in outcomes like the super mutants. So, for someone like Grey, who spent days soaking in the concoction, it had an extreme effect. After recovering from the mind-shattering pain of literally having his DNA rewritten, he recovered enough to notice improved mental capacity, which led him to experiment with animals within the military base. He also continued to experiment on himself until he unlocked his psychic abilities, and even the ability to connect to computers. His psychic abilities became so great that he passively generated a field of influence around himself, and anyone attempting to meet him required a psychic nullifier to pass through the corridor of revulsion. A corridor of human flesh that without any protection would project horrific images into your mind. This is what happens if you try approaching without a nullifier. The hairs on the back of your neck rise. You feel something from the corridor ahead. The bile rises as you recognize the mass of flesh ahead. Human parts in the wall itself. The worst part is that it is moving, calling to you. Your nose starts to bleed. You hear voices in your head. They are calling your name. Darkness washes over your eyes for a moment, but you recover. A voice calls to you. You turn your head and see the image of a forgotten friend, obviously dead. The worms fall from her rotted jaw as your headache grows. It is getting harder to move forward. Your foot seems bonded to the floor. You look down and the flesh of the floor is crawling up your leg. Teeth gnaw at your knees. Still, your headache gets worse. Something catches your attention. A flash of movement from the ceiling, and then a sliver of bone pierces your eye. With it come the thoughts of the dead and tortured. You feel the sins of others wash over your soul, and as it gets worse, as your sins answer them, like madmen they fight for your psyche, and in the process tear your personality apart. Your head is pulsing with the intrusive thoughts of others. The pain grows and grows. Suddenly, as if it never existed, the pain vanishes. You fall to the ground and weep, but something does not feel right. The pain in your head does not feel as bad as it did. The effects of the strange corridor do not feel as strong. This absolutely horrifying corridor leading up to the Master only gets worse. The psychic nullifier we mentioned looks very familiar. It's the same as the medicine that the Forecaster uses, and the Master uses these nullifiers on his other psychic experiments. Wiggum, Lucy, Moore, and Gideon. All of them are failures in his eyes, with varying levels of psychic abilities. The final resting place for the Master's psychic failures, though, is the corridor of human flesh that we just talked about, giving it its strong psychic powers. These aren't the last psychics you could meet at Mariposa Base either. In Fallout 2, the Enclave swooped in to try and gather a pure strain of FEV, and used enforced labor to dig out the location, after the Vault Dweller nuked everything in the first game. The laborers, being exposed to leaking FEV everywhere, began to mutate and eventually became super mutants. One of them, Melchior the Magnificent, was very interested in sleight of hand and magic tricks. He mutated along with everyone else and would be the final boss the Chosen One would face in Mariposa Base. He gained the psychic ability to control animals, and during the encounter will summon and control 4 Deathclaws, 4 Fire Geckos, 4 Floaters, and 4 Mole Rats. If, at any point, any of them are defeated, he'll summon more by throwing animals into the FEV goo, creating whatever creature he wanted and then commanding it to once again attack. There is potential here that he's just doing some insane sleight of hand tricks, but how likely is it that he could somehow have a bunch of highly trained, highly lethal creatures just stored away for when he throws the animals in the vats, somehow distracting us enough that we don't see the already well-trained animals being released? Maybe as likely as him being able to create mutants and instantly mind controlling them? Who knows? We also can't leave Fallout 2 Psychics without mentioning Hakunin, the shaman who is honestly really a big softie despite his appearance. While the Chosen One is searching for the Gek to save his village, they'll begin to have strange dreams of the Arroyo village being under attack by the Enclave, and the one sending these messages is Hakunin, who will find injured, barely clinging to life just outside of the village. We may think he just took too many drugs, but he obviously had some abilities as a shaman. Now, moving on to cryptids, Fallout 76 is filled with them, and none more memorable than our Lord and Saviour, Mothman. Whilst wandering Appalachia, you may have occasionally felt eyes on the back of your head, and when you start to look around, you eventually see a pair of giant, glowing eyes looking at you. The Mothman as Fallout is less man than legends say. It most likely came from the fact that it likes to hold its wings around its body like a cloak, and in the dark, could be mistaken for a man in a robe with giant glowing eyes. Mothmen have shadows pour from their bodies, and even appear to have the ability to almost teleport, with how fast they fly into the sky and land again in another location, leaving behind nothing but more of their black smoke, which may actually be a neurotoxin causing hallucinations whenever we get close. And if you do startle a Mothman, they can use sonic attacks to look an awful lot like Cabot's psychic attacks to defend themselves. Now, Mothman has a long and storied past in both our world and in Fallout. In Fallout, the Mothmen are divided into two camps, the Wise Mothman and the Red-Eyed Mothmen. Back before the bombs dropped in Point Pleasant, a cult worshipped Mothman, seeing him as a prophet and a protector. Just before the bombs dropped, this cult met up below the Mothman Museum, as they usually did, to conduct a ritual. They were all scared with the threat of the war and just wanted to know what was coming and how best to defend against it. The Wise Mothman appeared to only one of them in the congregation, Brother Charles, and let him know a flood would be coming. Taking this at face value, the cult decided to meet on the roofs of the town the next day to avoid being drowned, although they weren't expecting a flood of fire and nuclear destruction. They survived, and put it down to the Mothman saving them. Eventually, Charles led them to Lucky Hole Mine, where they encountered another group who had been led there by a calling. A calling from the firstborn of the wood, or the interloper. This caused a schism in the cult, as Brother Charles led his followers away to found the Lantern, a place they could worship the Wise Mothman, only returning on the equinox to conduct rituals to summon Mothman at Point Pleasant. The followers of the woods still worship Mothman, but it's a different form of Mothman. The red-eyed Mothmen who try to stop you when summoning the Wise Mothman at the equinox. Although you're drugged at the time of the equinox, so who knows how much of that is a hallucination. Mothman definitely has a connection to the Elder Gods, but they may even have a connection to the extraterrestrial. As you've explored Appalachia, you may have come across a man in a suit, a man giving you an incredibly creepy wide smile. You can talk to him, and at no point will he drop the smile. He will though mention his name is Indrid, and if asked about his coat will say, "I am cold." Indrid Cold, also known as the Grinning or the Smiling Man, first supposedly appeared in the real world just before the sighting of Mothman, and the two have been connected ever since. When Woodrow Derenberger was out driving one night, he came across a strange man who never stopped smiling. He kept his hands pinned under his armpits as if cold, and only used his elbows to gesture. Speaking telepathically, he told Woodrow his name was Cold and wished happiness upon him. The same thing he does for us if we meet him out in the wasteland. We aren't the only ones to meet him though. It seems he's been going around and worrying locals just by his mannerisms. For example, in this terminal entry for the Middle Mountain pit stop, Clyde details talking to a strange man. Some freak came into the bar last night. Didn't even see him come through the front door. Just looked up from cleaning the counter and there he was, grinning from ear to ear, wider than should be possible. He didn't greet me. In fact, he said nothing at all the whole time he was here. He put exactly 10 caps on the counter, one at a time. Well, that's how much a drink costs, so I handed him a beer. He took the bottle and sat by the fire for hours. Didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even drink the beer, the ungrateful bastard. Only sound I heard him make was a faint chuckle under his breath. Freaked me the fuck out. Gonna keep my shotgun real close from now on. Indrid doesn't seem hostile at any point though, just inquisitive and weird. He mentions that much has changed in his absence, and he just wants directions to anything interesting to look into. One thing to note though is his connection to Mothman. I mentioned they were usually connected just due to the fact that the Smiling Man appeared for the first time just before Mothman. But Fallout 76 pulls from other media as well. In Season 2 of the Adventure Zone created by the McElroy brothers, Indrid Cold is the human form of Mothman. It's why he appeared just before and always seems so out of place. He isn't even human. And, wouldn't you know it, if we attack the Smiling Man in Fallout 76, he disappears in a black cloud just like the Mothman. Due to his appearance in a green metallic suit and his mentions of the stars, he's also usually connected to aliens and the men in black in the real world. Now, West Tech Research Center is a location crawling with super mutants. Bethesda needed a canon reason for super mutants to be in Appalachia at this time, so they created this location. Originally, the researchers here were working on mutations for crops that would increase production to alleviate the food riots. As part of this, they had agreements with the farmers in the nearby town, Huntersville. Everything was going fine until the Greenhouse Initiative was shut down and all resources swapped over to the FEV Initiative. Now using Huntersville as a test location, they slowly mutated the residents, hoping to isolate useful strains of FEV. Most were failures. However, some did turn into cryptids that we can encounter ourselves. The Snallygaster was one of the first successful mutations on the 14th of October 2077. Able to successfully survive without medical intervention, it was set to be reintroduced to Huntersville to see what happened. But it managed to escape on the 3rd of January 2078 and has been reproducing, leading to the Snallygasters we find in Appalachia today. The original Snallygaster from the real world looked quite different, being some half-reptile, half-bird hybrid, with a metallic beak and occasionally octopus-like tentacles. But Bethesda went with a more mutated look to fit the world more. Now that West Tech had a stable sample, they experimented with it more and produced a stable giant creature, whose head seemed to shrink into its shoulder muscles. The Grafton monster was sedated and was being shipped out when the bombs dropped, giving it a chance to escape and supposedly reproduce. These were created by West Tech. However, given the existence of both the Tales from the West Virginia Hills and the fact that Sugar Grove was tracking sightings for both these cryptids before the bombs even dropped, there may have been versions of these creatures already out there. Another cryptid that Sugar Groves was tracking was the Wendigo. Beverly Solomon is the expert cryptozoologist at Sugar Groves and has a report of a Wendigo she saw herself. Just listen.
Beverly Solomon, cryptid analyst, 10/25/77. Wendigo witness report. Ooh, this is a spooky tale. Okay, so this is my own personal sighting. I was up at the ski lodge this past week, enjoying some well-deserved R&R. I guess I can never really be off the clock, though, because I happened to see something hunched on the slopes ahead of me. I thought it was some old coat, you know? I was moving pretty fast, so I was just trying to avoid it. Anyhow, it just unfurls as I get close. Must have been 10 feet tall, but just all skin and bones like a dead dog. It had a deer's skull cracked open in its hands from the fresh kill it was eating. And as I go by, I get this powerful cold feeling through my bones. I thought to myself, you know, Bev, you really lucked out getting that tattoo before coming out here on this trip. I can't imagine what kind of things I'm going to see next.
Now, some of you may have noticed the date there. She was reporting this just 2 days after the bombs dropped. Maybe she was trying to cope with what had happened by carrying on her normal job? Either way, Wendigos were present in Appalachia and also had their own Tales from the West Virginia Hill tape. We can find notes left by some people who've transformed into these creatures in places like the Wendigo Cave. Here you can find the progenitor Wendigo, or Morris Stevens as he was once known. He was originally the leader of the Gourmand, a cannibal raider group, but he was kicked out for eating one of their own along with his partner Edie. They retreated to this cave and began to attack passers-by to feed. Morris only gave scraps to Edie though, and began to change, becoming insatiable until devouring his wife Edie and fully turning into a Wendigo. The few named Wendigos we can discover in the game all have the same origin. At some point they were forced to consume human flesh and then transformed over time into a Wendigo, or, in the case of Earl Williams, a Wendigo Colossus, a larger Wendigo with 3 heads. Wendigos seem to have some connection with ghouls as we can find them in packs together, or while in Vault 79, a Wendigo could be found among the ghoul population, so most likely mutated there along with the rest of them. If we look at the real world lore for Wendigos, when a person eats another, they're possessed by a spirit of hunger. Maybe that's why, despite cannibalism existing in other Fallout games, we've only found the Wendigos here. The spirit of hunger only haunts this area, or something. A lot of new players who've come to the game comment about how terrifying an encounter with a blue devil is. This large bipedal wolf is terrifying at a low level and can still pack a punch at higher levels too, but where did it even come from? Bethesda really dug deep for this one. Back in the winter of 1939 to 1940, in the hills between Jumbo and Grassy Creek in West Virginia, a bluish, dog-like creature larger than a pony was said to be prowling the area hunting the livestock of the region. Some thought it to be a panther or a large wolf, and hunters flocked to the area for the reward money, until Elmer Corey bagged something that was described as not a coyote, but resembling one. And after he claimed the reward money, there was no more sightings. Fallout's Blue Devil is a wolf larger than a pony, though it's more like a werewolf than a coyote. It was added in the Once in a Blue Moon update, and among other things is the end boss of the event Safe and Sound, which takes place at the mountain pit stop, where we can actually find some notes about it. Now, this first one, the weird note, doesn't appear to make any sense at first. However, it's all in a code which can be deciphered using a nearby terminal. The user Wasteland Walker actually deciphered this within 2 days of the update releasing, and it has been confirmed that they got it right. The note actually reads, "Clyde, my friend, let me know if you find one with white on it. Need a hunting companion for finding the mother." Seems like someone actually wanted to train a blue devil, but wanted one with some white on it to stand out from the others. We can actually find a reply to this note in the investigation report, which does have one word that needs the cipher using on it, but fully translated reads, "They used to breed them way back, first for racing, then for fighting. Kept going on after the bombs. Doesn't explain their size though. Could have something to do with that place and what's nearby. At this point, impossible to tell. They're reproducing out in the wild, but most litters don't produce healthy enough pups to survive. The ones that do though, grow up. Fast. Immediately hostile, even young, so don't even consider it. Color variations are limited, especially local specimens. Black hair is most common. Appearing almost blue in certain lights. None were white, like you suggested. Payment has been received. This concludes our business." Apparently, they'd make terrible pets as they're immediately hostile. We don't really know what they mean by could be to do with that place, but I do have some theories. Firstly, the pit stop is fairly close by to the West Tech Research Center, and as we've discussed, they were experimenting with FEV here, and made some of the other cryptids in the area. Maybe they also created the Blue Devil species. The alternative is the Enclave. We know they're experimenting with Ultrasight, and with the new raid, we even fight a giant snake that has mutated due to the Enclave's involvement. Maybe they were the ones who carried on after the war before the plague wiped them out. Another native creature that was wandering around before the bombs dropped is the Sheepsquatch, who, if we listen to the wandering storyteller, is the result of someone loving a goat far too much. This isn't the only person to encounter the Sheepsquatch though. Calvin Van Lowe was part of a cryptid hunting group before the bombs dropped, and even went on to create a fake Assaultron Sheepsquatch that he managed to get stuck in mating mode. And based on the Sheepsquatch imposter you can fight in the quest Out of the Blue, It may have even somehow succeeded. One of Calvin's friends, Ray Gary, actually met the Sheepsquatch and barely escaped with his life, losing use of his legs in the process. He lied about how it happened so that no one else would go hunting and suffer the same fate. A lesson we would do well to learn. Ogua is a large, muscular snapping turtle that may have been foreshadowed in the Into the Pit DLC for Fallout 3. Mona, who has spent time swimming in the local river, has had her skin become diseased. Referring to herself as the Freak, she'll say the following. Saw another runaway down by the shore. Well, most of one anyway. Think the river monster got most of it. The river running by the pit is the Monongahela River. I apologize for my butcheration of that pronunciation, which flows through Appalachia, past the pit and later joins the Ohio River. This river is one of the locations that Ogua is said to live in, so maybe it was already foreshadowed back in Fallout 3. In Fallout 76, we don't have any answers as to where it came from, but we do know the cult of Mothman is hunting it as a sacrifice. They are convinced that its ancient blood will offer the Mothman visions of ages past. Of course, that's all ruined when we come in and take out all the cultists, and then Ogua as well. Honestly, are we the bad guys here? Continuing out of Appalachia, the next cryptid has a storied history in New Jersey. The tale goes that a woman cursed her 13th child, calling it the devil. What emerged when she gave birth was a dragon-like abomination that fled to the Pine Barrens. Being the 13th child has superstitiously been seen as unlucky or cursed, due to the number 13 being unlucky or related to the devil. In Fallout 76, we don't know where the Jersey Devils come from. Maybe it has the same origin. What we do know is that it's been breeding and that its blood makes an incredibly addictive chem called devil's blood. Antonio Russo learned this after killing a lesser or juvenile devil. He'd gone out to try and make a deal with the devil, but found only a hostile animal, and after defending himself, brought back the body and had it analysed. The only cure for the devil's blood chem is to make an antidote from an adult Jersey Devil's blood. While the adults seem to mainly stay within the Pine Barrels, the juveniles can be found around Atlantic City. Maybe they don't know enough to stay away from humans yet. In June 2024, Bethesda released the Skyline Valley update for Fallout 76, which brought along some new paranormal events. The first one you only find a note about, called Campfire Tales. Now, many people actually miss this note as it's a scrap of paper left on a bonfire at Camp Liberty, Lady of the Lake. In the very heart of Shenandoah, nestled beside an old lake, exists a camp steeped in legend. This place, once a sanctuary of joyful memories, now harbours countless tales of sorrow and regret. None more heartbreaking than the story of Amelia Huntsman. A name, when spoken, evoked dread into the most seasoned camper. Amelia, or the Lady of the Lake as she's better known as, arrived at this cursed campsite many years ago. Her innocent smile and innocent nature was a facade concealing her true hidden motive. Amelia attempted to strike a Faustian bargain with an uncontrollable power which has always been and always remains trapped in these very hallowed grounds. This bargain, as we have all come to know, would ultimately seal her fate. Who was Amelia, and what was the entity she made a bargain with? Was it one of the eldritch gods of Fallout, or something worse? The other cryptid-like being added in is a random encounter. Walking along, you may find a group of raiders attacking a solitary figure, wearing a mining helmet and wielding a Tesla rifle. This is the Electrician. He doesn't say anything, and after you help him, or he finishes the fight himself, he just disappears in a flash of light and smoke. Maybe all hope isn't lost with a silent guardian fighting the good fight. Let's talk about the clown in the room though, or the presence of serial killer clowns in Fallout with potentially supernatural abilities. On the boardwalk in Atlantic City, a nondescript shack sits, but upon lockpicking the door, we can find a gruesome sight. A ribcage with a clown toy chest bursting is in the corner, and there's a little shrine to a disturbing clown photo. Someone has placed some eyes on the table in front of it and scrawled, "He is seen," across the wall. If for some reason we want the clown picture and take it, our vision becomes distorted. The door slams shut and now we'll be cursed and hunted. Good job. Across the map, multiple clowns will now spawn watching us. Like we're being hunted by the killer that created the shrine, or the entity the shrine was dedicated to. This isn't the only shrine to this being we can find. At the mall is a mannequin with human eye, a clown hat, and a hatchet with "He-See" written on the wall. And finally, a woman mannequin with several buckets on her head, and when we finally remove them all, she also has human eyes, and on the wall is "She-See." This isn't the first time we've encountered clowns in odd spaces, though. For example, in the White Spring Golf Club, hidden in a fridge, we can find the clown calling card holding a red balloon, which is obviously a reference to the Stephen King's It. I did also find this clown doll with a hat stockpiling blast caps at the ruined town of Welch, which could be another reference to Stephen King's It and the collapse of the mine in the past. If we go all the way back to Fallout 3, we can also find another murderous clown, who was known across America before the war, but it doesn't look like the bombs stopped him. While playing Fallout 3, you may have seen this loading screen, and while the big headline catches the attention, it's the other one we're interested in. While this screen isn't great, we can actually find the Capitol Post building ourselves and read the full article from the 27th of July 2052. What American child hasn't heard the story of the pint-sized slasher? That diminutive demon in a clown mask who stalks and slashes the innocent residents of supposedly safe suburbia. It's just one of the many folk stories parents used to scare the youngsters into behaving themselves. Or is it? According to Germantown Police Chief Joseph Field, the pint-sized slasher may be more real than many people would like to admit. After reviewing the autopsy results of the Linden Street slayings, we have confirmed that the force and direction of every knife wound are consistent with an attack from a much smaller assailant, a child to be precise. Add to the sinister forensic findings this statement from Christopher Atkinson, the one surviving victim of the adolescent assassin, and it becomes clear that the pint-sized slasher does indeed walk among us. The clown, he's going to kill us all, do you understand me? He stabbed my brother Sean right in the face, he killed my brother, the little clown! But, assuming the pint-sized slasher is indeed a real, tangible threat to the peace-loving residents of DC suburbia, one question remains. Why? What could possibly motivate a child to don a clown mask and murder innocent people in cold blood? We may never know. At least not until the miniature maniac is brought to justice. Until then, all we can do is lock our doors, kiss our children goodnight, and pray they live to see morning. America was terrified of the serial killer, and it was on everyone's minds. So much so that when you finally go to Tranquility Lane as part of the questline to find your father, as a final act of cruelty to the people in town, you'll be asked to dress up as the pint-sized slasher with clown mask and signature knife and carve your way through the townspeople. This isn't the only reference to him though. In Point Lookout we can find two more, possibly copycats. Starting off with Kenny's Cave, after fighting through the Herzog mine you can find a nice, quiet cavern with Kenny in, who will let you stay as you don't seem like a bad adult. And on a table he has a replica of the pint-sized slasher's mask. On the same island, over at Homestead Motel in room 1K, we can find a horrific scene and another mask hidden among the bodies that litter this hotel room. This may just be a coincidence, as the Fallout 3 official game guide says this about the pint-sized slasher. A myth used to scare children who misbehave. The pint-sized slasher is said to appear from a dog kennel at dusk to chase the children around with a toy knife. The pint-sized slasher has been the second best-selling Halloween costume, topped only by Captain Cosmos. So it looks like this costume was actually very popular. There is a chance as well that at one point the pint-sized slasher was institutionalized at Parsons State Insane Asylum, the same one we encounter for the Cabot questline. We can find a terminal in here detailing the patients within the asylum, and one of them sticks out. Bobby was only 10 when he was admitted on the 10th of August 2074, but he'd committed multiple homicides and stabbings. The only thing capable of stopping his constant laughter is the music from Dracula, Toccata and Fugue in D minor. It says his family is local, and the Fairline Hill Estates is very similar to Tranquility Hill, with multiple companions bringing here commenting on how there used to be people living here, and now it's a ghost town. Maybe this is where the pint-sized slasher comes from, or at least one of them. See, the main problem with this is that the newspaper article came out in 2052, 12 years before Bobby's birth in 2064. It is incredibly strange that we'd have two 10-year-old serial killers in the Fallout franchise, unless something supernatural was going on. As always with the theories, put your tinfoil hats on for a second and think about what if the Pint Slasher was actually some kind of spirit or entity possessing these boys and causing them to commit all of these acts, leaving them broken afterwards. It would explain how we have both of these confirmed child serial killers and the possibility of one in Point Lookout across time. If we look at Stephen King's It, Pennywise, the antagonistic clown from outside of space, was a creature that fed on humans, inducing fear as a kind of seasoning, having a cycle of feeding and then laying dormant for 30 years before awakening to once again terrorize the town and feed. Maybe the pint-sized slasher is something like that. We have the obvious references to a clown, and the calling card of the clown and its red balloon are an obvious Easter egg when he makes the bully Henry Bowers attempt to eliminate the Losers Club. Maybe the clown we encounter in Atlantic City is just its current form, a new take on how to terrify the people of post-bomb America. It also may answer the question of what did the victims see? Pennywise's true identity is something humans can't comprehend. Usually seen as a bunch of orange lights, the sight destroys the mind of the viewer, possibly inducing insanity or making them catatonic. Maybe this clown's latest trick to season its food with fear is to show them its true form before feasting. I mean, it must be hard to induce more fear in people who spend every day in post-apocalyptic America with a constant fear of death every day. But clowns will always be terrifying. Which brings us to our last entity, a rather mysterious one. Throughout the Fallout games, you've been able to take a perk called Mysterious Stranger. The Fallout 3 official game guide had this to say about him. You have a guardian angel, but with a deadly hand cannon instead of wings. Meet the Mysterious Stranger, an odd and eldritch entity said to appear and aid you in combat before you draw your dying breath. Of course, it helps to have the Mysterious Stranger perk first. And this may explain the fact that we encounter him through every mainline Fallout. In Fallout 1, he may appear in any encounter. In Fallout 2, it's the same, except that they'll share the same gender as the Chosen One. So it is actually possible to get a female Mysterious Stranger in Fallout 2. In Fallout 3, he may appear when using VATS to shoot his .44 revolver at whatever you're shooting at. He also gets his iconic trench coat and hat that he keeps showing the other games. He'll just pop in, shoot a few times, and then disappear along with this tune. New Vegas actually built on the Mysterious Stranger lore with the Lonesome Drifter. You can meet him camping north of El Dorado Gas and Services, and when asked about his past, and in particular his father, he'll mention that he was a real mysterious fella, and a stranger to the family. His father abandoned them, leaving his mother to work her fingers to the bone. The Drifter even worked in a coal mine to help his mother make ends meet, but when she passed away, he was left angry and frustrated. So he took the only thing his father left him, the mysterious Magnum, and set out to find him, not sure what he'd ever do if he did. When we meet the Drifter, he's given up and just wants to settle down, and we can actually help with that. During the quest talent pool, you can recruit the Drifter for Tommy Torini, and if you pass a barter check of 50 during the quest, you can also obtain the Mysterious Magnum, which, when you pull it out, makes the same noise that the Mysterious Stranger does when he appears. Now, kind of hilariously, if you target the Drifter in VATS and the Stranger appears, he has no problem shooting his son. But on the Something Awful forums, Joshua Sawyer wished they hadn't run out of time so they could have hard-coded it, that the Stranger would actually turn around and kill the player character, further cementing the connection between these two characters. In Fallout 4, Nick Valentine has a case log on the Mysterious Stranger and has been hunting him for quite some time. Case, the Mysterious Stranger. Sightings of a man dubbed the Mysterious Stranger have been popping up sporadically across the old US for years now. Best case, the man's an amoral lunatic. Worst case, a prolific serial killer. All anyone knows is his MO, appearing suddenly, killing without remorse, disappearing without a word. The stranger has no known accomplices, no clear method for selecting his targets, no calling cards left behind. Sightings range from the NCR all the way to the East Coast, stretching back decades. Now, he's come to the Commonwealth. Last thing this place needs is another psychopath running amok. Time to start putting together the pieces to put this one away. Human male. Outfits vary, but most recent sightings describe a large overcoat and fedora. Guy has taste, I'll give him that much. One man, multiple men, a ghoul with minimal scarring. Might explain the long passages of time between sightings. Appears and disappears suddenly, suggesting preternatural infiltration abilities / access to advanced cloaking tech. All but the earliest descriptions suggest the stranger only uses one conventional arm, making infiltration training most likely. Perps like this make me wish the Institute had sprung for thermal detection before giving me the boot. Sighting locations. The Commonwealth, confirmed. Capital Wasteland, confirmed. NCR, old rumours. Shady Sands, really old rumours. In fact, if we have Nick as a companion when the stranger appears, he'll mention it and become frustrated when you don't catch him. Just adding this in post, I tried for hours to get the mysterious stranger to spawn so I could film this interaction with Nick. Even though it's like a 14% chance with the highest level, I shot literally hundreds of bullets for hours and could not get the mysterious stranger to spawn. Apart from with console commands, in which case they don't say that, so yeah. Finally, he does show up in Fallout 76 with a twist. He can show up with the Mysterious Stranger perk to once again attack your enemies in VATS, but with the Mysterious Savior perk, you can also be picked up off the ground by a Mysterious Savior. Weirdly though, both the Mysterious Stranger and Savior can appear at the same time, while there can only ever be one Mysterious Savior on the server at a time. For example, if two people with a Mysterious Savior perk went down and had the perk trigger, only one of them would have it work, as only one Savior can exist at one time. Whereas if someone went down and Savior triggered and someone triggered the Stranger in VATS, both would appear, meaning these are two separate entities. Now, the Stranger has changed appearances across the games, and we don't really know anything about him. He's had a child, and other than that, he seems to be amoral, helping us in each game, despite whatever our choices and alignment are. Some have believed him to be a synth created by the Institute using their teleporting technology. Others just a series of different people who all help us for one reason or another. There's even a theory he's a time traveler due to the resemblance to the magazine we can find in Fallout 4. The cover for Astoundingly Awesome Tales, The Man Who Could Stop Time, does seem to show someone who looks similar to the Stranger. And the Stranger always appears when we're in VATS, which doesn't quite stop time, but does slow it down a great deal. Personally, I can never get past that mention of him as an eldritch entity though. Maybe he's just the physical manifestation of some eldritch god that enjoys playing with the fates of mortals, like Nyarlathotep, and what we do just plays into his plans. Maybe it really is just some guy who keeps being in the right place at the right time to help us. Now, that was everything supernatural I could dig up. Let me know if I missed anything down below. I loved digging into this stuff, and it's always incredibly interesting when I spend 2 hours down a rabbit hole looking into the world building of someone like Stephen King, just because I found a single reference to him. Don't forget to do all the good stuff if you've enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. I think next we may look into the aliens of Fallout. I purposely avoided a lot of the Zetan stuff in this so we could do a big deep dive on them. Also, our Discord is linked below. I'd love for more people to join us over there to discuss the lore as I'm putting these videos together. But for now, stay safe out there in the wasteland, and I'll see you in the next one.